Welcome to Running Forward, a series where we talk about life and how to fit it all together. I'm your host, TJ Daly, and I'm here with two guys that I've known for 37 and 33 years collectively, my brothers, Trent and Todd. Today, episode 1, it's simple. We're going to get to know each other and introduce ourselves to you. So let's kind of get after it. Let's talk a little bit about what it is we're here to talk about, life.
Sounds good.
All right. So we've got the Boston Marathon coming up in 2 weeks. That's something that's taken a lot out of us. It's taken a lot out of our schedules. It's taken a lot out of our personal lives. And it's made being a husband and being a father difficult. I want to ask, I guess starting with you, Trent, I wanted to ask a question. You have a very unique situation. You own a business. You're very busy. You travel a lot. You have 4 kids. How do you fit it all together at 38 years of age?
Well, I mean, it definitely can be challenging. For me, it's just about making it a priority. You know, you got to put your family first, put God first. So outside of that, I mean, you're going to have to make sacrifices. Your business, you're going to have to make sacrifices. It's important to take care of yourself. It's going to allow you to be a better person. I think I'm a better leader. I'm a better father. I'm a better husband when I'm taking care of myself. So definitely there's been some sacrifices made, but overall, I think I'm a better person for it.
What has been the most difficult in terms of sacrifices you make? Like, is it difficult to look at your kids knowing you've got to go out for a run and you're not going to get to spend time with them? Or has it been something else specifically that you've struggled with?
You know, I think it's the family time. I mean, it's something that, you know, you just got to make the sacrifice. You got to put it in the schedule. And I think just, you know, taking the time away, my spouse, Angel's had to pick up a lot. So I think time away from the family is probably the hardest. I'd say the second hardest is just the long runs. I mean, it's monotonous. It's you know, running is fun, but it can definitely get old. And we're just like anyone else. Like, we don't wake up and every day just want to get after it. So some of the challenges of you get up at 5 a.m. and you don't want to go run when it's 30 degrees and dark outside. So there's a little bit of that along with just life.
Sure. One of the things that you've dealt with is a lot of adversity in this whole process. You're the one who's been injured, gosh, it seems at every turn. And it's, you know, breaking your ankle, having a hernia. What has driven you through those particular hurdles and kept you engaged where a lot of times, and I wouldn't even say that I might not see that in myself, where, you know, a normal person would just bow out and be like, you know what, it's not meant for me this year. I'll just forget about it and come back.
Yeah. Well, I think the ultimate goal was to run Boston with you guys. So my motivation came from being able to experience the Boston Marathon with my 2 brothers. That's why I never gave up. You know, when I got injured and broke my ankle, that was more of a stupidity thing. I was on a dirt bike and flipped it twice with my son, who's 8 years old. So I was trying to build memories there, but probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. And the disappointment that I was facing during that time, I went to James 1 in the Bible, and it talks about growth and when in your struggles. So for me, it was trying to find hope in that time and look at a different way. And I was able to get in through charity. I'm the only one who didn't qualify. But for me, it was about the journey. It was about the runs with my brothers. It was about the runs with my friends. And it still has been the last several months. The hernia was something that definitely happened. That was tough. That was 3 or 4 months ago. It just seemed like I could never get back there. But I think it's going to make it that much sweeter when I get across the goal. When I get across the finish line, I'm going to really reflect on, everything stood in my way, and I was able to get through it because of you guys and people around me.
Well, if there's anybody who understands how to not react to a broken bone, it's somebody who's broken 10 of them.
That was number 10. I thought I was going to avoid it. I hadn't broken one in 18 years, but yeah, so I guess I still got it.
I never broke any of his bones personally. Todd broke one, I think a toe.
Yeah, I did.
Kicked a soccer ball at the same time. That was, I mean, talk about brittle. So, you know, moving over to Todd. Well, let me step back a bit. Todd's the most naturally talented when it comes to running. I think Trent would argue that he's the more naturally talented athlete as it relates to your standard sports, basketball, soccer, football, things like that. But I think Todd, weighing 20 pounds less than us and being a couple inches taller than me and 6 years younger, lends to him being able to do some pretty spectacular things. You've taken a different approach to this one. You know, you do a lot of Orange Theory Fitness. Number 2 in the nation 2 years ago in the dry try, don't forget it. And, you know, how have you been able to remain confident that your approach is going to work when it isn't necessarily traditional and you're not running 50 or 60 miles a week? Like, what has kept you, confident in your approach?
Well, I think it's in part, if you don't know, excited to get to you here in a minute, but if you don't know, TJ actually does a lot of the coaching and laying out the plans for us as we go on this running journey. So the way you lay out the plans is great because we've got a couple workouts each week, right? We've got a long run, then we've got a workout. That's anything from 200-meter intervals to mile or 2-mile intervals, and so I really use that as a barometer. Honestly, if I'm getting through those workouts and I feel good and I feel healthy and I'm able to get through the long runs, I feel, that's really what I use. I feel good.
You also, similar to me, travel quite a bit. You spend a lot of time in Boston. You're really, I think you were there last week. How do you, that means you have to adjust your schedule a lot. You've got to do things on treadmills. You've got to do things crazy early in the morning because a lot of times when you're out of town professionally, that means you're up at 5 a.m., you go to work, you have clients or things that night, and you're busy until 9. How are you able to do that? Is there anything that you can think of specifically that you've had to do to get into miles at one time or another that was like really over the top?
Yeah, I go back to the time where I was traveling all week, had to come home. I had the 10-mile workout on Thursday night, ran it at about 9 o'clock, got done at 11, got home, slept 4 hours, woke up, went to Kokomo with these guys and ran a 20. And I'll never forget.
Is that the day we saw a skunk?
It was the day we ran into a skunk on the path. I'll never forget that. But I remember the last 5 miles of that 20-miler were absolutely horrendous because I had done those back-to-back. And one of the guys we run with, good friend Scott Reeder, kind of pulled me through those last few miles, which was awesome. But you talk about the journey and that type of thing. It's difficult. I think it goes back to what Trent said about the motivation. You can't pour from an empty cup, right? So finding ways to get that in, and yeah, it absolutely is. I went out to dinner, had an event on Wednesday night. I was in Boston this week, had an event at dinner, got on the treadmill at 9:30 at night, right? One morning I woke up at 6 in the morning, hit the treadmill. They have an Orange Theory nearby and hit that one day. So you got to be flexible and you got to get the miles in, but I think you do it because you know what it does for you. I've done a lot of cross training because I haven't really, I won't lie, similar to Trent, I don't love actually going out there running, but I love what it does for me. So that's driven the motivation and why I continue to make time to fit it in.
A question that I've got for both of you that I think would be interesting to talk to people about is, how has your perspective on running changed from the first time you walked out the door and what you had learned from running as it related back in high school or maybe middle school, and how you view it today? Because as you experience more, your perspective obviously changes pretty substantially. So we'll start with you, Trent, and then jump to Nerve.
Yeah, I would say probably the two major things for me would be the distance. Like when you first get out, you're like, a mile, 10 minutes, 11 minutes, like a mile's forever, like who? And then it's 2 or 3 miles, like a 5K was kind of the pinnacle. And now you don't even really get loose till 3 or 4 miles. So the distances have definitely shifted as far as, now we're running 8 to 10 to 12 almost every time out. So that was probably the biggest change for me. What about you?
Yeah, for me, when I started running, I ran a little bit in 7th grade in middle school, and it was all about the competition. It was going out there and killing myself to try and get in the top 3 or top 5. And now it's really a
intrinsic.
Yeah, self-improvement mechanism on a daily basis. Again, I don't have to overuse the pour from an empty cup analogy, but it does so much for me. I see it as a tool to make sure that I'm at my best day in and day out, right? That my mind's clear. It's amazing. You go out and you run, things, problems you've sat at a desk and for 4 hours burned on, and you go out and the first mile, it's all clicking. You know exactly what you need to do, and so I think staying fresh, staying energized, I just look at it completely differently than I did as initially as really a competition.
So for those people that are out there that are frustrated, that are a little bit beat up, and they go out, and we hear this all the time because being runners and this conversation comes up over and over again, and somebody will ask you, how fast do you run a mile? That's a real typical conversation. Yeah. Or how fast do you run a 5K or whatever? And we'll make a comment, and somebody says, oh man, I can't do that. Or, oh, I run 12-minute or 15-minute miles. What do you tell somebody like that to let them know that there's nothing wrong with that at all? You're getting out there, you're being healthy, but there's also places that you can go from there. Yeah. Because we've all been there where 12-minute miles, we're dying.
Well, I think that's the best thing about this whole podcast is we're all sitting up here as middle-aged 30-year-old men. We have kids, we have husbands, we have wives. We're not super athletes. We're not genetically, gifted with high VO2 maxes. I mean, we're just, going through life. We're trying to stay healthy, live a healthy lifestyle, as Todd alluded to. We don't worry about time as much anymore. TJ brought that up. Every time I went out, I thought I had to get after it and run sub 8. And now it's a balance of, just getting out and getting the miles in. I didn't realize at first you couldn't train for endurance and speed at the same time. It's a different process. I mean, you can run a lot slower and a lot longer, and you build your stamina. So it's just about effort. It's about putting in the time. It's about making it a priority. It's not, running isn't something you need a lot of coordination for. I mean, I have fallen a couple of times, but it's one of those where most people can do it. I know there's some injuries that will prevent you from doing it, but it's one of those that it is therapeutic, and it's something that I think almost everybody can at least start. And sometimes you just start with walking. Yeah. It's walking a mile. I mean, we joke, Todd ran a sub 3-hour marathon, but his first mile was what, 11 and a half? Minutes. A 12-minute mile he gets on the treadmill. Toast. And then he runs 26 miles under 7 minutes. Like, I guess what I take from that is you can achieve your goals. There's not anything here that can't relate to other people.
I think one of the things you said, I can't do that. I think there's an implied statement that people forget on the back half of that, which is, if I do everything else in my life the exact same way. You're right. If you do, you're right. You can't do that. But I think what we've learned over time is that if you reprioritize some things, you're that much more productive at those things, and you're getting more out of your day than you were when you're working and running. So for me, I think, and I always go back, I love to quote the Arnold Schwarzenegger, if the Pope can find time to work out, if the President can find time to work out, you can find time to work out, right? The reason those guys find time to work out, because they've got to be on their A game and everything else they do every single day.
Absolutely.
Which is critical. So I think it's that implied piece at the end that if I'm not willing to change anything else about what I'm doing on a day-to-day, then you're exactly right. But if you're willing to take a leap, to change things around, I think you'll find that those things that you do want to fit in, you're going to be, tenfold more effective at.
I think it's important too, just to build off that, you kind of both touched on it, is really doing what works for you. And you're going to inspire other people, I think, in that regard. I look at people that wake up and run at 4 in the morning. We ran a marathon relay last week, and I follow a guy on Strava who ran the same thing, except he ran the half marathon by himself, and he woke up the next morning and rode his bike for 4 hours, which is crazy to me. Super inspiring, but man, you just ran a half marathon in 1 hour and 13 minutes, which is flying, by the way, and you got up and you rode your bike for over 4 hours? That's nuts, but it's inspiring to me and lets me know that I can go farther, I can push harder. There is that, opportunity or option for me to do that. It's just going to be juggling my life. I may never do it in the morning because I'm not a morning person. I may do it at night or work it in at some other point in time, but doing anything like that and I guess attacking it and taking it builds a path for other people to follow.
What I think is important about that is everyone has their sweet spot, right? Some people live and breathe this stuff. That's what they want to do, right? Whether it's triathlons or they're trying to run 2.5-hour marathons and it becomes a lifestyle. For others, it could be something simple as going out and walking a couple miles a day. Mom did that for years, right? And that's what kept her fresh and kept her mind right over the years. So, that's one thing I would say. I mean, we've grown to, I think, make this more of a hobby, I guess, in a sense, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, to that level of intensity for everyone.
Speaking of intensity, yes. let's refocus towards TJ a little bit. So he's who got both of us into running, actually, and my journey kind of started when we went to we kind of mule or help him in his first 100-mile race, the Lean Horse 100 in the Black Hills of South Dakota. So Tell us a little bit about how you started in marathons, and then you got into ultras, and then maybe you can touch on the ultimate 500K that you completed.
You know, I think we talked about this lightly before. We were running one day, and one thing that I think you'll get to know about me over this whole journey is that everything in my life is cataloged by runs. So I remember things schedule-wise by where I was that day for my run, and almost all the conversations I remember are on runs that we do. I remember us running one day on the Greenway, actually here, and having the conversation about our parents and where our niche was with our parents, and what, you know, you were the athlete from a, you know, traditional sports standpoint, and you got a lot of attention that way from our parents. You were super talented in school, and you had amazing grades, and you got attention that way. In school, I was a little bit different and a little bit over the top. So, you know, I acted out socially to get attention, but I never had done well in sports. You were a good golfer, a good bowler, you were a good runner, you were a good basketball player, you know, almost all of the same things for you. I never really had that. And I think, you know, I think part of the reason was I was afraid. I was afraid to go do those things because I didn't want my younger brothers to beat me. I remember I was a freshman in high school, and I ran home crying from the courts in Florida because you beat me in a three-point contest at 15 years old, or however old I was. So I was sensitive to that, and I never really pushed myself beyond, because you guys kind of had that part of life in my mind cinched up. So, you know, I ran my first marathon in 07. You called me in 2012 and said, I'm running my first. I wanted to be there for that. I wanted to be part of that, you know, and was able to lose 60 pounds in a couple months, came back. I think it was a week after I got back, because I had moved back here from Seattle, here being Indiana, and we ran that marathon. And I'm like, you know what? I like this. It's enjoyable. How far can I take it? And that kind of, and how far can I as an average person take it? Because like you said, we don't have crazy high VO2 maxes. We're not, we don't live at altitude. There's so many things. We're middle-aged. We have families. Like, with all of these constraints, how far can I take it? It started with a 50K, and then it started a couple months later. Then a couple months later, it was 50 miles, and then finally it was 100 miles, and culminating, I guess, from a distance perspective, in July of 2015, when we did 314 miles across the state of Tennessee. It was a 7-day journey, but I mean, all that did for me personally was reinforce why I do this. And, you know, yes, during that time, I had plenty of time to think. Running 50 miles a day out there by yourself, and it being in July in Tennessee at 95 degrees, you ran at night. So I'm out here in pitch black darkness running by myself. So clearing your head, time to think about anything you want to think about. Then, you know, you get to be part of this team and this camaraderie, because doing something like that, you're an invalid. You can't do really anything yourself. So you have people that are taping your ankles for you. They're preparing ice baths for you. They're getting your food for you. They're making food for you at the stops. They're filling your water bottles. So you get to experience that and remember how good people can be in a world like this. So, you know, a lot of those things, and then it showed me that there are no limits. And you guys know in my email signature, I say run without limits, you know, and so that's kind of how it all came about.
Speaking of your email signature, Run Without Limits, obviously you've gotten into educating others, right? So you've run, I think you said 11,000 miles over the past 6 years, and over the last year or so formed Michigan Track Club, got a dozen or more people involved in that you train and coach. Talk a little bit about that experience, not only going through it, but then helping others. What keeps you going on that front? Maybe what are some of the frustrating things?
That's been an interesting experience, because, you know, I've always been fascinated with coaching in general. Like, how do you know what you're doing? We were lucky to have a dad who coached every sport, but where was the blueprint for that? Like, how did he know? I mean, are we replicating, you know, what other people are doing? Are we developing our own perspective on things? So, you know, it's been interesting to learn, because running has evolved from a coaching standpoint so much over the last 50 years. You have Lydiard and Bowerman and Daniels and Fitzinger and all of these different people that have taken these radically different paths to the same success. You know, guys that are running 50 to 70 miles a week. Somebody like Roger Bannister, the first person to break 4 minutes in the mile. Minimal training in comparison to some of the guys that ran for some of these other coaches where they're putting in 150 miles a week and they're doing, you know, somebody who would train with Canova and they're doing these crazy long, you know, 30K workouts where other people would run, you know, 8 400s or something like that. So learning about that and learning there are so many different approaches and then pairing that with the person you're working with. Like we said, cross-training works more for you. You know, you referenced Scott Rieger earlier. For Scott, he works better in smaller workouts and less mileage during the week. You and I, when you're healthy, have some real similar capabilities when it comes to handling that 40 to 50 miles a week and workouts of a certain distance. So doing that is really rewarding and really interesting. And it does get frustrating at times because there are so many different approaches and there's so many people out there that think they know. And if I've learned anything from the coaches that I follow and listen to, it's listen to the person that you're coaching because they're going to teach you way more than you could ever learn by reading book after book after book.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how would you sum up the journey, right? I don't know how many miles and the coaching and all that kind of thing. How would you sum it up for someone that might be sitting on the sidelines thinking, what's a one takeaway? Like, what's a one thing you'd say about your running journey so far in the last decade or so?
I will tell you this. I, to this day, never thought I'd be here. And you look back and people talk about the running high and it's addicting and yada, yada, yada. It hasn't ever clicked. Like, I've never had that moment where it's like, wow, I love this and I want to do it every day. Like, I still have days where I don't want to do it. You know, I don't want to get up and, or I don't want to get out or it's too windy or too cold or whatever. But it's become this habit by sheer happenstance. And it's realizing all of the benefits from it. You know, I can be more flexible with my diet. You know, I can have a 3,000 calorie day and not think about it because that's what it takes just to keep me on my feet. So, you know, don't feel like you're ever going to have this epiphany and all of a sudden you're just going to be this runner and you're going to have to get out and it may not happen for you, but just stay consistent and make it a priority and don't try to pour from an empty cup. And I think you're going to, you know, you can get there. I absolutely believe you can get there. So
I think that's one of the things that, I mean, I'm doing it for health now. I'm the slowest one in the group. And really at this point, it just depends on, you know, where we are in training. But for me, it's about health. It's about overall health and trying to find a hobby that we do like to eat. That's something that we have always liked to do. And when we get together as families, we try to always get a run in. It's been great for bonding. As adults, you know, it's when you have adult siblings, it's sometimes hard to find common grounds. But if you're going out and running 10 to 12 miles, you get to hear the stories about the kids. You get to, you know, talk about frustrations at work or successes. And it's been a good platform for us, you know, to just continue to build our relationships as well as, you know, with other people around here. There's been several people that I've run with locally here that were like, I'll never run 3 miles unless someone's chasing me. And now there's 3 or 4 people that will go on 8 to 10 to 12 mile runs that thought they would never do it. So a lot of it's mental and a lot of it's just getting through that hurdle. But kind of like you said, it's just staying committed and now we're here. So
I have one more quick question for you, T, and then I want to switch gears a little bit. One of our good friends, John Faust, you've been training for a year now. He's lost
100 pounds?
80 to 100 pounds. You completely transformed him, and you've been a huge part of that from a coaching perspective. What have you taken from that? Like, what has that been like to be a part of kind of changing someone's, you know, life?
What he's going through right now is amazing. You know, Trent made a comment about running by yourself and things like that. John is inspiring for me. You know, he does not, given his work schedule and everything else, he runs most of his runs by himself. And luckily, you know, Trent, you've got Scott, you and I have each other, and Caleb and some of the other guys that run in the group. John does I just recently started running with him once a week. He runs 90% of his miles by himself. He gets out there and he grinds, and he's gone from a 5-hour marathon with you, or 5:20 or something of that nature, to breaking 4 hours this last year, to running his first 50K here in a week from tomorrow. So it's crazy inspiring, because you never thought seeing John at 290 pounds or whatever he was would be, able to go out and accomplish what he has. So, I mean, it's been awesome to watch and be part of.
So this has been a little bit of a different first episode, because we've kind of done the interviews and such. I know in the future we want to kind of do certain segments, right, where we kind of highlight certain things. And I got to go back to one of the names you brought up a little earlier, Roger Bannister, right? So I think he passed away, a month ago now?
Yeah.
Give or take. First guy to ever break 4-minute mile, right? 3:59 and change. I think when he did this, the years leading up to that, they actually thought physically you would die. Like, physically you could not break 4 minutes.
That's
like,
absolutely
that was
true.
Right? And then he breaks it, and then 18 months after that, I think how many people had broken the 4-minute barrier in that?
Well, I know 500 people in the U.S. alone since that time. More than 500 people in the U.S. alone since that time have broken it. And prior to that, I mean, I think there was a mile record that was set, 1931 or something, that stood for 12 years. I mean, and I don't have, the name escapes me, but there was a well-respected physiologist and coach back then that said you die. The human capacity for a mile was like 3:59 and change, and I mean, after he did that, it's like that mental barrier. It's like once somebody does it, right?
But what's funny about this one, I kind of tied it to, and Trent, maybe direct the question to you. It feels like it happens within ourselves, right? We have this kind of that same dialogue as we go through our journeys. Like, I can never get there. I can never qualify for Boston. There's no way I can break an hour and 30 in a half marathon. Like, when you think back, like, what's the one thing that you think about where you said, there's no way I can do this? You got over that mental barrier, and it was like, it was a non-event.
Yeah, the hour and a half was a big hurdle. When we ran the mini, it was just like, I don't see how this was possible. Like, 13 miles at 6:50, and you just commit and you stick to the training and trust it. I mean, even during that time, you'll have off days and not days, but if you have someone that knows what they're doing, and in this case, TJ put together all the training for us, you trust the training and you go out and give it your best. I think sometimes we even don't want to give it our best because we don't want to fall short. I think we have a tendency as humans to, I don't want to go 100%, because if I give 100% and I don't really do it, then I just don't have it. And so just committing and going all in and making sure, like, you hit the workouts, because if you don't hit the workouts, it's not going to happen, and if you don't hit the workouts, TJ's going to be all over you. So you had a double motivation there, and we ran the 1:29 and change, and man, the emotion that comes from that, you start thinking about all those runs and all those mornings you didn't want to run. It's beautiful.
It's funny you mentioned that. I even go way back to starting this journey when I broke the 10-minute mile, right? When I did. No joke, I ran that 12-minute mile around the neighborhood, and I couldn't breathe. Like, I thought I was going to collapse in it. But I remember when I got into a single-digit mile, when I broke 10 minutes, which is a couple of months thereafter, that mental barrier, and you just continue to build up those kind of small victories. So.
My experience with it was more speed than anything. Because I remember when Caleb moved back here, this guy we run with moved back here from Pittsburgh, and he's like, let's go do speed work. And he's like, we're going to go run, 7-minute miles or something. And I'm like, dude, no way. Because in ultras, you're running 8:45s, 9s, 10s, 11, 12-minute miles. And, if it wasn't 6 months later, here we are really getting after it. But it took somebody to put it, for me personally, it wasn't even intrinsic. Like, it took somebody to push me over that threshold. So that would be my experience with it.
Yeah, so I know we'll be doing more of those segments in the future, a little different format. We want to give a little dose of that, but...
Yeah, so we're running up on a half hour. Thanks again for joining us on episode 1 of Running Forward. We're going to have, hopefully, release these on a weekly basis. It's been a little bit of a struggle, but we are going to make time for it. So thanks again, everybody, and we will see you next week.